My name is Rich Weinberg, and I'm a member of Congregation Dor Hadash, and it is my great pleasure to welcome all of you to this program where we will get to hear from my Pundak and Rula Hardal, the co-directors of A Land for All, which is a joint Palestinian-Israeli organization that is attempting to reimagine a true two-state solution, which represents a homeland for all. So we thought it was important to bring Mai and Rula to speak to us about a potentially hopeful approach to this challenging problem. Thank you for being here. It is a great honor. Rula Hardal is a research fellow at the Shalom Hartman Institute. She received a doctorate in political science from the University of Hanover, taught in Germany, then in 2015 returned to Israel, Palestine, and has been teaching at universities there, currently at the Arab American University in Ramallah. Her research has been focused on Palestinian and nationalism and the role of women. Is that a fair description? Okay. And in 2023 became co-director of A Land for All. Mai Pundak is an Israeli human rights attorney, an activist. She is the daughter of Ron Pundak, who was one of the architects of the Oslo Accord in 1993 and 95. And she has been involved with A Land for All since 2021. They became co-directors in the wake of October 7th. So, I also want to mention that they were the first recipients of the Vivian Silver Impact Award in 2024. That is an award named after the Canadian-Israeli peace activist Vivian Silver, who was killed by Hamas militants in the October 7th attacks. It recognizes the valuable contributions of Jewish and Palestinian women who are working to carry on the legacy of Vivian Silver in terms of peace, partnership, and female leadership. So it is a great honor, and it's been a great pleasure to spend the day getting to know you. So before going into a discussion of the proposal and the political terms and all that's entailed, I thought it would be valuable for our audience to learn more about your backgrounds and your personal journey that brought you to become involved in A Land for All. So, Rula, would you like to start?
Thank you, Rich. Thank you for having us here, for the invitation, and for all of those who were involved in inviting us. And thank you for each one in the audience this evening. You already started speaking about my journey and about my background. I will start from October 7th. I do remember that day into the smallest details. Everything started at 6 a.m. It was a Saturday. And I knew already that day that everything is going to change. I am going to change, but mainly everything that is related to Israel, Palestine, is not going to continue the same we get used to or we know. And that Gaza is not going to be Gaza after October 7th. And we entered actually this disaster, it's a disaster for both people, for the Palestinians and the Israeli Jews, and we are still there. We are not in a post-war, and even not in a post-October 7th. We still live it. A couple of weeks later on, I was a board member, new board member at the Line for All. The founders and the board members actually asked me to take on myself the position of the co-director, and I decided to do it because of personal and political reasons that are intertwined. I cannot separate them. The personal, I couldn't imagine myself continue doing my academic career as nothing happened. And I thought doing this work might give me the ability to continue living there in Israel, Palestine, while being able also to breathe and to do something. And the second reason is what I started saying, that everything is going to change after that. And I knew that it's not going to be easy. It's going to be a new, negative, hard, even harsh period in the history of the conflict, in the history of both people. But I could also, at that time, and I still see it, I could identify the narrow opportunity that maybe now, after these disasters, and we were at that time at the beginning of the war in Gaza, maybe from these two disasters, we can see an opportunity for change. Yeah.
So the disaster was recognized as an opportunity for change,
Yeah.
and you were going to contribute to making that change. Okay. A very brave thing to do at that time, I'm sure.
Well, I didn't know if it's brave. I didn't think that it's braveness of me. It was a calculation of emotional and political considerations.
Yeah.
And a lot of realpolitik. Maybe now, after these disasters, we can hopefully do something, because being involved in this conflict and the history of both people and the relation between them over the past 2 decades of my life, but from the academic perspective, I noticed, and May noticed, and all of us who are involved in this work, that people stopped talking about Israel Palestine outside, mainly.
I think the mic is.
Mainly the Israelis and the Palestinians. There was a kind of normalization of the situation,
Okay.
of the occupation, of the apartheid, of racism, of supremacy. And the Palestinians also get used that these are the conditions. But behind the scenes, we know, or we get to know, October 7th, that no, the Palestinians were not silent, or not all of them were silent, accepting. And we were expecting all the time the exposure of the Palestinian people from this situation and from this silence in the world and in Israel regarding their situation. And to be honest, all of us that we consider ourselves to be experts of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, we mistaken Hamas and we mistaken the origin of the disaster and the uprising, where it's going to come from. We all thought it's going to happen in the West Bank, but it came from Gaza.
We'll explore that further. Mai, please tell us a bit more about your background and how you became involved.
I was taken back to October 7th for a moment, so I'm also feeling all of that. As Rich said, I grew up in a very political family. I had the privilege, really, of growing up knowing that an essential part of me being an Israeli is also me fighting for peace. And I was just sharing with Rich and Rula on the way that I was rereading a piece that my father wrote just before he passed away in 2013, where he says that for him, solving the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is, for him, a continuation of the establishment of the State of Israel, meaning that the State of Israel was never fully established and fully independent because of the conflict, ongoing conflict with Israel-Palestine, and that only through a Palestinian state and through Palestinian liberation, Palestinian freedom, Palestinian independence, and most of all, for Israelis' peace and security, will we be even able to say that there is, a real, free, independent Israel. And so that's the state of mind that I grew up with. And so that was something I was very lucky in, and I would say that's very different today. Most of the people born after me don't remember the Oslo Agreement and don't remember this historic moment of recognition of the two people. But as my father was doing this kind of business, I was more interested in human rights and activism and education and legal battles. And so I was doing that for a long time. But then my father passed away, and a couple of years later, I had a boy. And I became a mother. And after and obviously, as a Jewish mother in Israel, the first thing that happens when you have a son is a complete mental breakdown, because being a mother is a constant mental breakdown, but also because knowing that you have a son and that he will legally, need to go to serve in the army. Yeah, that's hard. And so when my son was born, I realized that I've been an activist for a long time, and I have been fighting against occupation and doing a lot of dialogue work with Palestinians. But at the end of the day, where is this going? And where are my leaders taking me? And what I figured out is that none of my leaders were actually offering me a vision for a better future. And none of my elected officials were actually offering a way to solve the number one threat for my child's safety, which is the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And that made me extremely depressed. And I found myself kind of moving with this activism, but realizing that I don't have any hope. And being a mother of a young child with no hope for their future is dangerous. And so it was out of that, coming to terms with that reality of lack of leadership and lack of good answers, and people, we can talk about that later, but people talking about the two-state solution while it is crumbling between our fingers and being harder and harder to, commit to saying, oh yes, two-state solution, where the reality has changed to such a degree where the two-state solution is that we know is impossible, where the international community has neglected it completely, and where the Israeli society has normalized, as Rula said, and shifted its agenda from peace-seeking into shrinking or managing the conflict, which is actually entrenching the inability of a Palestinian state, and that moved me to look for a vision.
So what I hear is that you both have been spending much of your life considering this issue. It's been central to your development and your careers, and that the trauma that you've been observing has spurred you to say, I need to do something different. So help us understand a bit about the organization, A Land for All, how long it's been around, and how it's organized. Tell us.
The idea of A Land for All started actually a couple of years ago, more than a couple, maybe 14, 15 years, by a group of people, Palestinians, Israelis, scholars, activists, lawyers, journalists, and so on, who started actually after a while, after the failure of the previous peace agreement, Oslo, in the mid of the 90s, and then the break of the Second Intifada, and the start of the blindness and the ignorance of the Palestinian issue in Israel, in the public discourse, in the political discourse, the agenda of political parties. They started meeting and asking themselves what went wrong actually, and how can we re-envision the reality on the ground, but also the two-state solution. So they came up after a lot of meetings and discussions with this idea, which is one of its strengths. It's co-creation of Israelis and Palestinians. It's not an American peace deal, with all of our respect to the Americans and their deals, or sometimes less respect.
You're really good in other things, though.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a Palestinian-Israeli political vision and the institutionalization of the idea in order to take it further and to develop it happened 2022. And on the way, we learned to establish the organization in a better, equal way. So we have a real equal shared organization and movement. And it's not only an organization, because we have also this layer of building constituency around the organization and the idea in Israel, in Palestine, and also beyond the homeland abroad. So this is actually how the whole idea started, and since October 7th and the war after that, A Land for All started getting a lot of attraction. Because if you remember, immediately after October 7th, the whole international community, not Israel, not the Israelis, the international community started speaking about the two-state solution again, and that we need to solve the conflict. And what they came up with is actually the old idea that failed before 30 years, and that's why there were a lot of people among these diplomats and decision makers that reached out to us to hear about the new idea of the two-state solution that we offer.
So help us all understand, what are the core values and principles
Yeah.
that you've incorporated into this, what you describe as the two states, one homeland proposal, and how it differs from the two-state solution that we've been arguing and despairing over
Yeah.
since the 90s.
I'm happy to start with the values and the principles, because these values and principles can develop also into any other political framework. So if anybody can take these principles and values and build around them a better platform, we are happy also to discuss it. But we think that the political framework that we are offering is the most realistic, not just. I'm not speaking about absolute justice as a Palestinian, but a kind of just for both people and for the Palestinians, the people that I belong to, and I do what I'm doing because of being Palestinian. So we claim that our political vision is the most realistic one for now, for the coming years. The values and the principles start from acknowledging, first of all, the reality on the ground, which is binational reality. We have two groups of people. These two people claim their belonging to the whole entire space between the Jordan and the sea. But we don't also forget the Nakba of the Palestinian people, while acknowledging the binational reality on the ground. And we don't underestimate.
Can you not hear so well?
And we don't underestimate and we don't forget the one state construction that we have in Israel-Palestine, where actually we have only one regime, which is the State of Israel, a supremacist regime that negate the collective rights of the Palestinian people, and that practicing a very harsh rule of apartheid and military control over the Palestinian people. Do you know that October 8th, for example, I'm giving only one example. I'm giving one example about the mode of revenge that actually standing behind the policies of this government in Israel, but also that explain the public opinion in Israel regarding the Palestinians. The only example, or one of the examples, that if you visit now Israel, Palestine, you will see the 300 checkpoints that were distributed in the West Bank to separate the West Bank from Israel became October 8th, 900. In the West Bank, we are speaking about a tiny piece of land. So we started from this acknowledgement, and we claim that this unequal, asymmetric situation between these two groups who claim their belonging to this place cannot continue to be actually this assumption that shape our reality. And therefore, the second principle is equality. And since we are speaking about national groups, we cannot only speak about equality in terms of individual equality, but we need to speak about the right of self-determination of both people. And to be much more accurate, we are speaking about practicing the right for self-determination of the Palestinian people, because we have Israel as the homeland, as the expression of the right of self-determination of the Jewish people. The other two principles that we emphasize and that you won't find in any other peace agreements or peace efforts are recognition of the traumas of both people, of collective memories that shape who we are, and reconciliation.
So what I'm hearing is it's the acknowledgement of the experience of Palestinians from the Nakba and the discrimination, but simultaneously the acknowledgement of the Jewish commitment and for a Jewish homeland as well.
Yeah.
So help us understand how the proposal goes beyond the territorial swaps that have been endlessly discussed, and help us understand what's different about A Land for All's proposal.
So what we propose, and I'll try to be kind of to give you the principles of the 5 principles of the proposal, and then maybe share the differences between the classic two-state solution. So A Land for All starts with something that is pretty familiar to all of us: 2 states. 2 sovereign, independent, democratic states. 67, green line as the border. Nothing new under the sun here, right? So, yeah, 2 UN representatives, 2 different independent states. I say this a few times because normally at the end, the first question from the crowd is like, but why are you not a 2-state solution? So, 2 states. Number 2, one homeland. The shared homeland we'll talk about when I get to the differences between this and the classic 2-state solution, but thinking about the program for a minute, the one homeland means a few things. Number 1, it responds to what Rula addressed as the psychological, collective sense of belonging of Israelis to the entire homeland and of Palestinians to the entire homeland. So normally here, the 2-state solution becomes this zero-sum game of needing to be in an either-or reality, or to divide in between, and okay, you're going to be here, we're going to be there. And here we offer something very new in saying, yes, 2 sovereign independent states, but the homeland is shared. And so it's shared emotionally, it's shared psychologically, and there are good examples, for you can erect a wall wherever you want, but Jaffa, Haifa will forever be Palestine, forever. And so will Hebron and Nablus will forever be Israel. But that responds also to, again, what Rula was referring to earlier, the facts on the ground and the interdependency of Israelis and Palestinians, of Israel and Palestine today. And that is where we add the extra level of shared institutions to take care of the things that we must take care of jointly if we want to survive. Climate, public health, water, economy to a certain degree, and even security to a certain degree, and I'm happy to talk much more about that later. But we talk about shared institutions, a human rights tribunal to take care of the things that we need to take care of jointly, which is now taken care of by only one side of this partnership. And so we add a level of shared institutions. I think the EU model is a good model to imagine these shared institutions that do not take away too much from the sovereignty of the 2 states. The 3rd principle is freedom of movement, gradually. Freedom of movement and freedom of residency in the entire homeland. And again, France and Germany, or the EU model. It took 80 years there, it might take 80 years here. But moving towards an integrative model where people can actually exercise the one homeland mentality and allow people to exercise their belonging to the homeland, right? So within that, we differentiate between citizenship and residency. Palestinians will be able to become permanent residents slowly, gradually, on an individual basis, will be able to reside in Israel, but they will be citizens of the state of Palestine. And Jews will be citizens of the state of Israel, but maybe gradually in a different way, will be able to reside and become permanent residents of the state of Palestine. And again, France, Germany. This is exercise in political imagination, but the thing is, it has been done before in so many other places. Northern Ireland is another good example. Principle number 4, I'll just finish
So let me just, well,
yes.
go ahead.
I just want to finish that kind of package, and then we can elaborate on the content. So 2 states, 1 homeland, shared institutions, freedom of movement, freedom of residency, gradually. And then principle number 5 is, so principle number 4 is shared Jerusalem. Jerusalem as one city, not a divided city. It's the capital of both states. It will have a special format for Jerusalem, but it will be a shared joint city. And then the last principle, which again alludes to what Rula was talking about, is not to rectify one injustice by creating another, which is a really important principle because that leads us already to reconciliation and to transitional justice.
So if you're a Jewish, if you're in one of the settlements in the occupied territories in the West Bank, you're in a Jewish settlement, you will be a citizen of Israel, you'll be a resident of Palestine?
No, because there won't be settlers. They will be Jews residing in Palestine if and only if they have not committed any acts of Jewish terror.
Okay.
If and only if they accept the sovereignty and the independence and the legal system of Palestine. If and only if occupation ends, there's no IDF, there are no privileges, there's no supremacy in Palestine. And if and only if they have come to a position where in our solution, what we're offering is that an elaborate way of dealing with the current settlements, meaning that private land goes back to private ownership. There's a set of reparations and to folks with private flat land. State land that is now state land of Israel becomes state land of Palestine. And within that framework, and of course, whoever has committed a crime against Palestinians is out. But within that, in this future that we're imagining, but also concretizing, Jews will be able to reside in Palestine as permanent residents without hurting the independence and freedom of Palestinians. This is maybe for Rula to elaborate more. But I do want to maybe say a few words about the difference, the lessons learned from Oslo. So maybe Rula can talk a little bit more about that, and maybe I'll say a few words about the lessons learned. But I think that's a really important component of our work.
To say something about the settlements. No, I just want to, I agree with each word that May describes about the issue of the settlements. But I will add another point. It's not, it's a real obstacle, yeah? We know it's going to be a real obstacle if we speak about only having 2 states according to the previous old paradigm. But meanwhile, for me as a Palestinian, if all settlers are going under this political platform not to be in Palestine, I'm fine with that. I wish we could really, to be honest, without now being nice, if the government of Israel, when the day is going to come and they will negotiate this political vision with the Palestinians, if they will be able to take all settlers from the West Bank and bring them back into the state of Israel, I will be happy. But I know that it's not going to happen. And we are fine with that as Palestinians, but they will be just all other normal people without any privileges. And not all of them. The last point that I would like to clarify. When people hear this, and when people also hear about the right of return of the Palestinian refugees, they think that everything will be a mess in Israel-Palestine. It's not the case. The majority of Israeli Jews are not going to reside in order to live in Ramallah or in Nablus. And the majority of the Palestinians are not going to decide one day that they want to live in Tel Aviv. There will be regulations of how one can apply for residency on both sides. And we should also remember, when we as people living in this modern states, we are usually connected to our places because of our children, schools, work, and so on. So it's not going to be, masses moving between the borders.
So, what do you envision as a way of dealing with security issues, which safety for both populations is a primary concern?
Of course.
And right now, it's a very punitive regime, certainly in West Bank and Gaza. What do you envision as control? How will these two sovereign nations collaborate to secure the freedom of movement and the safety of their citizens? What do you imagine?
So, yeah. So I'll start with something that people don't know about so much. Right now, there's really very little security right now. For Palestinians, there is none. For Israelis, there's much more and still very fraught. But October 7th has taught us a few things about security. Number one, the paradigm of shrinking and managing the conflict has failed. It has exploded in our face, like Rula said. If you do not solve a conflict, the conflict solves you. What happened in Gaza is not a military mistake or a security problem. What happened in Gaza is a lack of a political solution. It is a political problem. The political problem is Israel-Palestine. Until we do not solve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, there will never be security for Israeli Jews in Israel, ever. So that's number one. By the way, clearly no security or stability in the Middle East. By the way, clearly no security for Jews around the world. So number one, the answer to security is a political arrangement. And that is why we are advocating for this vision now, because it is urgent now. It is not something for people to talk about later or think about later or after we reestablish this or disarm Hamas or destabilize Gaza. We're not going to be able to do any of those things if we do not solve the problem. So we urge you also to help us echo that message. Solving the conflict is urgent. It's not a conversation for later. I'm with you on the I'm still on the security role. Number two, right now there is still, if you could believe it, a very tight security collaboration between the PA and Israel. It's a very problematic cooperation because Israel is occupying Palestine and because Palestinians in the West Bank have seen what we've been able to do in Gaza and are experiencing it now in the West Bank, and in Israel and in Lebanon, but there is tight security cooperation between Israel and Palestine. And so when people tell you that separation and big walls is an insurance for security, please call them out. That is not true even right now during this time. What helps me as an Israeli Jew be safe now is the IDF cooperating with the PA. That will forever be the case. That has always been the case. And so again, we are moving away from the paradigm of segregation and separation and big walls into a paradigm of cooperation and collaboration and shared interests. So that's number 2. Number 3, the reason for the insecurity is the conflict. Therefore, if the conflict is solved, and this is a good example to think about in Israel, Egypt, Jordan, the places where we have safety and security, the places that have, Jordan has been the #1 responsible for my safety during the first attack of Iran a year ago. The collaboration with the Air Force of Jordan and Israel is what kept me safe. So when we talk to Israelis, that is what we tell them as well. That is what will keep you safe. But what I wanted to say even furthermore, if we go deeper to the problem of security, and this is where we connect to the lessons learned, is that a peace agreement is not only an agreement. What we're advocating for is a transformative two-state solution, a transformative peace agreement that solves the deadlocks of the classic two-state solution and solves the deadlocks of the conflict. So when Rula was talking about the right of return for Palestinian refugees, she was talking about it not only because it's the just and right thing to do, and obviously Rula will advocate it for as a Palestinian, but I know as an Israeli that if I don't address the refugee issue, I will never have a peace agreement. And so what we're offering is a solution that addresses the core issues of the collective identities to a degree where you untie the reasons that create instability and insecurity. And so I think that that's very important to remember, right? So it's not just an agreement and an arrangement. It's a real solution to these issues.
I do want to add another very important lesson learned from the previous peace agreements, especially Oslo. The end game. A clear end game. We know now, and we knew then, as Palestinians at least, that there is no serious intention for a Palestinian independent sovereign state. And that's why we start in our political vision from the end game. Not less than a Palestinian sovereign independent state. We start from there, and from the connection between Gaza and the West Bank and East Jerusalem, solving the deadlocks of Oslo that include also the right of return and the 7 million Palestinians in the diaspora, and we reverse engineer everything from there. And the Palestinian people are not going to negotiate anything after what happened in the last 30 years, and especially in the last 2.5 years. They are not willing to negotiate anything that is less than a sovereign Palestinian state.
So this is going to require a dramatic increase in trust and goodwill. Am I right? Or
I love this question.
all right.
It gets me excited.
Well, a forced marriage here is will lead to mutual acknowledgement, and you're talking about mutual acknowledgement and interdependence, which is critical to this collaboration. How are you proposing to build that, and give us some sense of what's happening, the building of constituencies within the Palestinian community, within the Jewish communities, that is helping lead this way? Fair enough.
את רוצה לדבר על מה אנחנו עושות ואני אדבר על ה-trust? אני כל כך אוהבת את השאלה של trust.
They're speaking in Hebrew.
We're dividing and conquering.
She likes the question of the trust, but before you start the question, I will continue. The metaphor of the forced marriage. A romantic proposal is not going to be also the case. So let's find a combination of both.
I do just want to say that we didn't respond to your specific questions about security, and it's a very important one, and we don't want to shy away from it. Right now, when you think about the process that went through the EU states, right, or Northern Ireland, you see that there are endless mechanisms to ensure safety and security that are not based on ethnicity, race, and religion. They're based on individual cases. There's no problem with the ability, the technical ability to do that. Definitely not for Israelis. We have the technical ability to do anything. So that is not a problem. The challenge really, will be to switch an already existing cooperation into a cooperation that is built on equality and partnership. That is what we're offering. And I think within that, one of the things that we love about A Land for All as pragmatists, right? And Nancy was referring to this morning, like we want to make this work. And so we try to change the most with changing the least, right? And so within that, the freedom of movement, right? The freedom of movement allows us to say, okay, we can move freely, we can cooperate, but we have shared institutions to ensure that cooperation and collaboration are sustainable and are equal and bring both interests into the table constantly to build a sustainable day-to-day. And within that, by the way, with that freedom of movement, there's more interest for security. You already insert the incentives for security, right? When you create that kind of shared interest state of mind, instead of big walls and separating each other and say, oh, I never want to see you again. Whatever happens behind the wall doesn't implicate or in me in any way, which is of course not true, right? You think about any example, but just to think about water or thinking about economy or thinking about anything that happens on one side of the line will obviously affect the other. Okay, trust, or maybe you should start with אולי תדברי קודם על מה אנחנו עושות.
מה אנחנו עושות? אנחנו עושות הרבה. We do a lot of international advocacy. International advocacy, which means, as I said at the beginning, we got a lot of attraction from diplomats, from governments, from foreign ministers, even the administration here, but not this current one. Actually, we met. Yeah, I have to admit, we still find it very hard to even reach out to this administration, but the previous one, yeah, the European Union ministers and foreign ministers in the Arab world, in the region, we are invited to the most high-level security conferences and diplomatic conferences in the world, which is an indicator of how the international community sees actually the importance of this political vision to improve their hollow shell of the classic two-state solution. The second important thing that we do is actually public work in Israel and in Palestine. We meet each year thousands of people. We do a lot of grass tops work and also working with politicians, with influentials, media and social media and so on. And just to emphasize maybe one example about these successes in Israel last year or a couple of months ago, the biggest mass movement of Israelis and Arabs inside Israel standing together, עומדים ביחד, adopted our political vision, and other initiatives, organizations, peace organizations are also considering doing the same. The same we are doing in Palestine. We are building also the movement itself of Palestinians and Israelis. We have not only a joint board now, but also joint assembly and 2 national assemblies. A lot of people, thousands of people are reaching out in order to join, to sign this political vision. And the last thing that we do is to develop the political vision, to be prepared for the day that the political situation and conditions are going to change, and we are sure that they are going to change from inside, from outside, because of both things. So we are doing a lot of research work to develop the political vision itself, in collaboration with a lot of universities around the world, including some leading universities here in the States, and translating this knowledge, this comparative research, this knowledge that we know about Israel, Palestine, into policies and platforms that the negotiators are going to be able to practice later on.
Trust. Israel, look, we hope that this conversation can bring you hope. I'm being very honest, because there's a lot of hope to draw from this work, especially as what is said, as Alan for All has been growing exponentially since October 7th in Israel and Palestine, by Israelis and Palestinians. The sense of urgency, the sense of need, of vision, of alternative has been, you know, the biggest it's been in a long time. And so we're really feeling it, just thousands of people reaching out to us to meet us. We have to do speaker trainings for our leadership in order to even address the amount of requests that we're getting from Israelis and Palestinians to meet and hear about this idea. And that's very encouraging. Having said that, and I don't need to elaborate, the situation on the ground is horrific. It's awful. It's the worst it's ever been. And so a lot of people ask us, like, you're talking about a solution that is based on collaboration and partnership, where honestly, Palestinians really don't want to see Israelis right now. And Israelis don't want to see Palestinians either. And that's true. But what we also know is that that is not how conflicts end. Conflicts don't end in a linear process of getting to know each other and trusting each other and loving each other, and then we solve the conflict. That never happened, ever. That's just not the case. A month before the Berlin Wall fell, when you asked Berliners if the wall is ever going to fall, they said never. A month before the Good Friday Agreement was signed, when you asked Irish folks if the conflict will ever end, they would say never. This is a fact. Same in South Africa. So I urge you not to think that trust is a condition to get to an agreement. It is not. It is, historically, it is not. So that's number one. The second part of my answer is that I come from, I spend a lot of my time in Israeli-Palestinian dialogue and people-to-people work. And I can say that I am a true believer that relationships can change the world. Having said that, dialogue between Israelis and Palestinians has become an excuse not to solve the conflict, or has become complicit in a reality where we can meet each other and talk as if we are equals and return to an extremely unequal reality back home. And then my activism is meeting Palestinians, but not changing the reality on the ground. And that has been, unfortunately, not to say anything about these saint people who do it, it has become part of the problem. Because if you don't fight to end the problem, right? If you don't actively change the material reality on the ground, it continues. One thing that has been missing, and again, that is one of the reasons why we do this work, to complete that, right? People-to-people work is essential. Trust building is essential. But if there is no political vision and no commitment to an end game at the end of that process, it doesn't lead you there. We stay in the same place. That is extremely dangerous. And the Palestinians, and I know that you experience it here in the anti-normalization movement, have come and said, enough. We will not normalize meeting with Israelis anymore if you do not fight for the end game that you promised us, which is independence and freedom. And so what we're saying is that trust will only be built if the side that has power commits itself to an actual peace. So, and I'll just end by one interesting piece of information that I think is really important. Rula said that we work a lot with the international community. We work with the Executive Board of Peace from the Trump plan. We do. We try to give good pieces of policy and information to decision makers. But one of the leading experts on stabilization forces that has worked for 20 years on stabilization forces in 22 countries has worked with us and shared his experience. And his experience and lessons are that if you ask people to stabilize a place without helping them be sure and trusting that at the end they will get recognition, independence, freedom, security, you'll never be able to stabilize anything, ever. And so the agreement, the solution, the vision is an essential component for any stabilization, for any trust building. So it's just the other way around.
I do want to open this now to questions from the audience. We're going to give an opportunity for the people here initially, and then we're also going to be monitoring the chat for questions from Zoom. Why don't you introduce yourself very briefly with your name?
Rabbi Jamie Gibson from Temple Sinai. I'm the retired rabbi. I've been to Israel 35 times. I've been to Palestine 6 times, to Ramallah, to Rawabi, and other places. Just wanted to know, since other groups are trying to do things in parallel with you, do you have any connection with Ali Abu Awad in Tagir? Any connection with Sulha, who are bringing Palestinians and Israelis together, or is that a dead end in terms of the social interactions? What coordination so that people are not fighting against each other, trying to do the same thing? Thank you.
Yeah, we collaborate with all of these people, and I do think that the majority of them started even using our language and terminology, and the majority of them are very aligned with our political vision.
Yeah, I'll also start with just a big yes. Like Ali Abouad is a dear friend. We do events together often. Their work in Tahrir is very aligned with the Land for All. And I would say that really if you do follow kind of the rising up of the peace camp since October 7th, you'll see and hear that the language of partnership, the language of shared homeland, the language of shared future, the language of interdependency, the language of no one's going anywhere, like this is language that really has evolved at a Land for All. And I think we've been very, very proud in participating and taking a leading part in coalitions, and many of them, like the It's Time coalition that was just had a huge event with 5,000 Israelis in Tel Aviv a few months ago, and several Palestinians. But you can hear in the language of these coalitions that it's shifting really from a paradigm of separation and segregation into a paradigm of shared interests and shared future and partnership, which I think is tremendously encouraging. So of course, we also believe that this has to become, belong to as many people as possible, this vision, so it, becomes their own. The one other thing that I would say is that the hope is that we are able to build a coalition with the Arab parties, which is essential for us to win, and again, to practice this logic of partnership. And I'll just say about the mainstream addressing the mainstream, it's a good question. One of the resilient features of a land for all is that it was created by a very diverse group of Israelis and Palestinians, including religious folks, including Mizrahi folks, including ultra-Orthodox folks who support us. Even some progressive settlers support this vision very actively. And I say that because we don't start from only international human rights and international law. We start from the sense of belonging to the homeland, the shared sense of belonging, the love, the attachment. That is a post-liberal starting point, which is not to say, again, that we respect it, but just to say that it brings a lot of new communities into this movement and makes it much more stronger and much more broader. So the answer is yes.
So we have about 15 minutes or so. What I'm going to do, I respect the people who have been standing, but I also know the people have been on Zoom. So I'm going to ask Nancy Bernstein to share some of the questions that have been shared in the chat, and then we'll finish with the folks here.
Great, thank you. So there's just 2 questions from the chat. From the Zoom. So one of them is about, does Land for All have any practical power to impact the formation of this viable 2-state solution? And what would having an impact look like? And then I'll just read the other one. Under 2 states, can you both elaborate how freedom of movement and residency rights would be accepted and peacefully enforced?
Thank you.
Okay. I will start with the last question. It will be implemented gradually. We think that under the conditions, the psychological also conditions that we are in as Palestinians and Israelis following these 2.5 years, it's not easy to jump from this situation of separation and hatred and lack of trust and even fear, mutual fear, into immediate open borders and practicing the freedom of residency. We think that, first of all, there is a need to come to the table and to negotiate all of these issues with a timeline. It took for the Europeans about 80 years to establish the European Union after the end of the Second World War. If this is going to be the case of the Israelis and the Palestinians, we are happy with that.
For power for us, and I think that's really what we're focusing our efforts on right now, is becoming politically relevant. This has been a good idea for a very long time, with a lot of people supporting it, from kind of like, when you ask them, they're like, oh yeah, there's this good idea. Now it's time for political power. Now we want to be the political vision, the new political vision that is on the table for Israelis who are choosing life instead of death, basically. Whoever is choosing a sustainable future that is based on life and not on killing and dying in Israel-Palestine should come up with a good answer. And this vision, we believe, can be that answer that provokes hope, but very, very practical and pragmatic solutions as well. And moving in between being the new alternative, right? This new big idea, because this is a moment of big new ideas. Everything is changing. Old paradigms are crumbling beneath our feet. We need new paradigms. We need good ideas. And it needs to be very integrated with where the reality and the facts on the ground are. And again, lessons learned and other conflicts and other solutions. And that's why, apropos the question about residency and citizenship, we have established a research department of experts, of Israeli and Palestinian experts and international experts in UCL in London, in UCLA, in Brown University, in Carnegie Endowment. We're doing the work with experts to come up with these answers so that when the moment comes, when we bring that moment and it arrives, we're ready.
Hi, my name is Aidan Halpern. So I wasn't conscious in the 90s, but the United Nations of that era feels dead, or at least dormant. So do you see a role of the United Nations in this peace process, or do you see a role of any international institutions?
Thank you both for being here tonight. My name is Becca Cordes. I appreciated you mentioning the EU as a potential model for this two-state solution that you're proposing. One of the things that I learned back in high school was that the precursor to the EU was actually built upon the Alsatian region and their coal and steel resources. And so from the very beginning, the precursor to the EU had this economic sort of impact of shared economic development. You mentioned it earlier as being a possibility for the Israeli-Palestinian coming together for economics there, but not a necessity. If you were to go that route, what would be an obvious first step in tying Israeli and Palestinian economic futures together?
I want to be very sincere. We don't have all the answers to all the questions on exactly what it's going to look like. We have a framework that is based on comparative literature and comparative research of other conflicts that have been solved sustainably. And we have a framework that Palestinians and Israelis can both sign up for because they answer their collective needs. And so there's a lot of research to be done about how Jews will be able to reside in Palestine as permanent residents and not citizens without creating a system of oppression. It's very complex. But let me tell you, that has been happening around the world. There are good examples of that. The head of our research department actually wrote his PhD about that, with 5 comparative cases around the world of how that happened after a decolonial struggle in other places. So let us assure you that we're not selling something without doing all the work necessary to be sure that this can work. It's very important to say it's not going to be easy, but we're doing the work, and there are good examples. So
it's also important to say, May, that nobody can ensure that everything is going to work perfectly. Even very powerful established states have a lot of problems and have a lot of crises that develop because of the development of internal and regional and global conditions. We are not living in static situation, none of us. And yeah, we can prepare, even in our research and policy and so on, the best scenarios and answers for all expected, predicted problems. But the same we are as person, not perfect, and our lives are not always perfect the way that we want. Also states are the same.
I want to take the shared economy question is a really, really great one. I will say that in the partition plan in 47, in the original Oslo agreement in 1993, very tight economy collaboration was established in both of those agreements. I think that was we do live in a neoliberal world, and we can be very upset about it, but we do. And there's a lot to say about how do we drive a better, fair, equality economy in Israel, Palestine in general. But what I want to say that is really important is that if there is not going to be a resilient, strong economy in Palestine, Israelis will not be safe. There's a direct correlation between economy and security, direct. And so it's extremely important to establish a strong economy in Palestine, but to understand what we've been trying to advocate, and I hope that has been clear, that there is such an interdependency at this point that we have to also collaborate and work together. There are a lot of shared interests around this, and maybe the easiest way to talk about it is natural resources. Who does the gas that is outside of Israel coast, who does it belong to? Water. You know, the aquifer, the pollution in Ramallah gets to Tel Aviv. The pollution in the Mediterranean Sea that is now spilled in Gaza, after 24 hours, it gets to Tel Aviv, to the shore of Tel Aviv, and then I can go into the water, and I don't know why, and guess what? It's occupation, right? Like, we need to acknowledge that that's how things work. And so we're trying to create that system that can actually deal with those huge problems and challenges that we have to take care of jointly. So that's around that. International forces, and I'll end with that. The international community is an essential player. We strongly believe, and we are committed to doing the work first and foremost in our own communities, because the solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict has to be owned by Israelis and Palestinians. It cannot be owned by anyone else. And that's why we're taking agency and building a constituency of a diverse and large and growing group of Israelis and Palestinians. But I will be lying if I would say that we do not need international help. And that is why we're very committed to doing that work. And does the UN have a role? I mean, honestly, at this point, whoever wants to take part in solving this conflict is welcome. We will work with anyone who is committed to solve this conflict in a decent, realistic, pragmatic, but also value-oriented way.
Maya, Rula, you've been wonderful at explaining these complex ideas, and we're so grateful to it. I'm going to ask one last question. How can American Jews be most helpful to a land for all? And what are your final words that you'd like to share with the audience?
Thank you for this question. Tell about us. Spread the word. We need a lot of support from a lot of people. We need also people to support the idea, not also to support us in terms of resources, but also resources in order to continue doing this work and to expand this work are also needed. The second or the third, use your connections and status as citizens here in this place to impact your Congress people. And maybe if you have direct connections to the political leadership in Israel, you should also give them the right message.
So one of the biggest challenges of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is that people believe it can't be solved. And it can be solved. There's no solution to this problem. And the other is that the two-state solution is dead. And the third is that there's no partner. And so I hope that tonight we've answered those three challenges and proved that wrong. And so one thing that is really important for me that I hope that you can take out from today is that when you are confronted by people saying that, please challenge them, please. Because conflicts do end, and if my family now lives in Berlin, then anything is possible, right? If Jews are living in Berlin by choice, anything is possible. Now, it's important for me to say it because we always think it's impossible. Well, guess what? Conflicts end, and then what? So let's believe. There's a sense of belief that needs to change in our mentality. This conflict will end. The question is when and how, and that is up to us. And so I encourage you to believe that it can end, and that when people say there's no solution or the two-state solution is dead, send them our way. We will do the work. Send them our way. Number two, as what I said, raise these voices of Israelis and Palestinians doing this work and of these ideas. We need people to write about it and to hear about it and to know about it and whatever. And to educate about it. We need people to know. People don't know. Let's help people know. And three, sign up. We have the newsletter we try to make interesting. We have WhatsApp groups that we share. We have a lot of media coming out. We have a lot of things that we do. We have Zoom conversations that we do, often in English. We have interesting content. We want to bring it around. This is a new idea. So we need a lot of chewing. We want your response. We want your engagement. So sign up. And of course, we need your support. We need financial support. We need political support, we need support so that, as we said, this can become the new leading idea for how to solve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in our lifetime.